I drove 8 hours to surprise my mother with front row tickets to Andrea Bocelli's farewell concert for her 60th birthday. The tickets cost me 3 months' salary, but I thought it would finally bridge the gap between us. At dinner, she raised her glass and announced to everyone, "To my Nathan, still the family dreamer, but at least he can afford nice things now." My Aunt Sylvia leaned over and whispered, "Expensive gifts don't fix a wasted education." I stood up silently, took the envelope with the tickets from my mother's handbag, and walked out. By morning, she'd called me 43 times. Then her supervisor called too. Those 8 hours on the road gave me too much time to think. I'd rehearsed the surprise 100 different ways in my head. How I'd casually slide the envelope across the table, how her eyes would light up when she saw what was inside, how she might finally look at me with something other than disappointment. My mother had worshipped Andrea Bocelli since I was a child. We couldn't afford much back then, but she'd play his CDs on our secondhand stereo while cooking Sunday dinner, her voice joining his in broken Italian she'd taught herself from library books. It was the only time I ever saw her truly happy. When the opportunity came to buy tickets for his final world tour, I didn't hesitate. I worked extra projects, skipped lunches, sold my collector's guitar, and somehow scraped together enough for 2 front row seats. I even arranged for a signed program, called in every favor I had with a college friend who worked in event management. The dinner was supposed to be intimate, just close family at my mother's favorite seafood restaurant. My sister Emma would be there with her husband, Aunt Sylvia, and my cousin Patrick. I'd asked Emma to make sure Mom dressed up, saying only that I had a special surprise. "Nathan, you're late," were Mom's first words when I arrived, despite my being only 7 minutes past our reservation time after driving since dawn. "Sorry, traffic was terrible coming into the city," I said, kissing her cheek. She smelled like the same perfume she'd worn my entire life, something floral and vaguely medicinal. "Well, you're here now," she said, her tone softening slightly. "Emma says you have some big surprise?" After dinner, I promised, settling into my chair, "Let's enjoy the food first." The conversation flowed around me as I picked at my salmon. Emma talked about her promotion, Patrick about his new condo, and Aunt Sylvia complained about neighborhood construction. Mom beamed at each of them, asking questions, leaning forward with interest. When she turned to me, her smile faded just slightly. "And how's the computer thing going?" "The computer thing is my software development company, Mom, and it's going well, really well actually. I'd built my business from nothing. After dropping out of the engineering program she'd insisted I attend. 3 years of struggling, living on ramen and coffee, working until my eyes burned every night. Now I had 15 employees, contracts with 2 major retailers, and had just leased actual office space instead of running everything from my apartment. But none of that impressed her as much as Emma's middle management position or Patrick's ability to secure a mortgage. "That's nice, dear," she said, already turning toward Emma to ask about her husband's new car. The dessert came, a small cake with a single candle. We sang happy birthday, and Mom closed her eyes to make a wish. When she opened them, I pulled the gold envelope from my jacket pocket. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said, sliding it across the table. She opened it slowly, confusion crossing her face before her eyes widened in shock. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Andrea Bocelli?" she whispered. "Front row?" I nodded, allowing myself a smile. "His farewell tour. And there's a meet and greet afterward." She stared at the tickets, her hands trembling slightly. "These must have cost. Don't worry about that," I said. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something I'd been waiting for my entire adult life. Genuine appreciation. Then she passed the tickets around the table. "Nathan got tickets to Bocelli," she announced, her voice higher than usual. Emma gasped appropriately. Patrick whistled. Aunt Sylvia examined them like she was checking for counterfeits. Then Mom raised her wine glass. The restaurant lights caught the ruby liquid as she smiled broadly. "To my Nathan," she announced, "still the family dreamer, but at least he can afford nice things now." Everyone laughed. "Everyone except me." "What's wrong?" Emma asked, noticing my expression. Before I could answer, Aunt Sylvia leaned closer to me, her voice low but perfectly audible. "Expensive gifts don't fix a wasted education, you know?" Something inside me went very still. I looked around the table, at my sister's awkward smile, at Patrick's sudden interest in his dessert, at Mom still beaming, completely oblivious to what had just happened. Or worse, perfectly aware and unbothered by it. I didn't say a word. I simply stood up, reached for my mother's handbag where she'd tucked the envelope, and took it back. "Nathan?" Mom's voice went sharp. "What are you doing?" "Reconsidering my investment," I replied calmly. "Don't be dramatic," she said, her smile stiffening. "It was just a joke. You know how we tease." I looked at her directly. "I do know. That's the problem." And then I walked out, ignoring her calls behind me. I got into my car and drove away, hands steady on the wheel, despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. By the time I checked my phone the next morning, she had called 43 times. Emma had texted repeatedly, "Mom is hysterical. What were you thinking? You can't just leave like that." She was just joking, please call her. Then my phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Nathan Porter?" a man's voice asked. "Speaking. This is Robert Daniels, your mother's supervisor at Meridian Publishing. We need to talk." I wasn't always financially comfortable. 3 years ago, I was sleeping on a futon in a studio apartment so small I could touch both walls while lying down. I ate store brand cereal without milk to save money, and worked from public libraries for the free Wi-Fi. My mother called those my rebellion years. She never asked about the panic attacks that drove me from college, the crushing weight of trying to force myself into a career I hated just to please her. She didn't want to know about the nights I stayed awake, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. "A degree is security," she'd repeat whenever I called home. "Your father would be so disappointed." My father died when I was 14. She'd been wielding his ghost like a weapon ever since, reshaping his memory into whatever form served her argument. The truth was, Dad had been gentle and encouraging. He'd been the one who bought me my first computer, who sat beside me as I figured out how to write simple code, who told me to follow my passion. Emma was different. She thrived in structure, excelled in academia, followed our mother's blueprint perfectly. I struggled, questioned, diverged. In our family dynamic, that made me the problem child. When I finally left college to start my own business, the emotional blackmail reached its peak. Mom didn't speak to me for 3 months. When she finally did, it was to tell me about Emma's honors graduation. But slowly, painfully, my company grew. I made every rookie mistake possible, but learned from each one. When a financial app I developed went viral, suddenly clients I'd only dreamed of were filling my inbox. That's when my family started noticing me again. Invitations to dinners returned. My mother introduced me to her friends, without the usual preamble about my alternative career path. Emma asked for tech advice. "Looks like your little hobby is actually working out," Mom said during one Sunday lunch, her first acknowledgement of my success. I paid off her mortgage last year, transferred the money silently, then called to tell her to check her bank account. "You didn't have to do that," she said, but I heard the catch in her voice. "I wanted to," I replied. "Well," she said after a pause, "I suppose this makes up for some of the gray hairs you've given me." Even her gratitude came wrapped in reminders of my failings. "Why is my mother's supervisor calling me?" I asked, gripping the phone tighter. "Your mother came to work quite distressed this morning," Robert Daniels said, his voice professionally neutral. "She was unable to focus on her tasks and eventually had to take a personal day. She mentioned a situation involving concert tickets." I closed my eyes and leaned against my kitchen counter. Of course she dragged her workplace into our family drama. "Mr. Daniels, with all due respect, this is a personal matter." "I understand that," he replied carefully. "However, Patricia has been with Meridian for 20 years. When she asked if I might help mediate, I felt obligated to reach out." "Mediate?" I couldn't help but laugh. "She wants you to convince me to give back the tickets after she humiliated me?" There was an uncomfortable pause. "She says she's afraid you might share what happened publicly, that you might damage her professional reputation." That stopped me cold. I hadn't threatened anything of the sort. The realization hit me like ice water. She wasn't upset about hurting me. She was worried about how she might look to others. "I never said that," I replied quietly. "She's quite concerned that you might, post about the incident online." "Mr. Daniels, I'm hanging up now. Please don't call again regarding this matter." I disconnected before he could respond and sat heavily on my couch, my mind racing. My mother wasn't worried about our relationship. She was worried about her image. 5 minutes later, Emma called. "Mom's a complete wreck," she said without preamble. "She didn't sleep all night." "Hello, you two, Em. Nathan, this isn't funny. She's saying you're threatening to expose her or something?" "I never said anything like that." "Then why does she think because she knows what she did was wrong?" I interrupted. "And instead of apologizing, she's spinning scenarios where I'm the villain." Emma was quiet for a moment. She said it was just a toast, a silly joke. I took a deep breath. "Would you joke about someone being a disappointment at their birthday dinner after they just gave you an incredibly meaningful gift?" "Well, no, but then don't defend it." Emma sighed. "Look, you know how she is. She doesn't always think before she speaks. That's exactly the problem. She's been not thinking about how her words affect me for 32 years. And everyone just excuses it because that's how she is." The silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken frustrations. "What are you going to do?" Emma finally asked. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm not rushing back to apologize if that's what you're asking." After we hung up, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and tried to focus on work. But my mind kept drifting back to that moment at the dinner table. Not just my mother's toast, but everyone's reaction to it, how they laughed. How no one, not even Emma, had seemed to think anything was wrong. Had I been living in a parallel reality all these years? Or had I simply been accepting treatment that no self-respecting adult should tolerate? My phone buzzed with another call from my mother. I silenced it and made a decision. I grabbed my keys and headed for my car. 3 hours later, I parked outside Meridian Publishing's modern glass building. The receptionist looked up as I approached her desk. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Patricia Porter." Her eyes flicked toward a hallway. "She's in her office." "Shall I let her know you're here?" "No need," I said, already moving in that direction. I found my mother's office easily. Corner location, name on the door, just as she'd always proudly described. The door was ajar, and I could see her hunched over her desk, phone pressed to her ear. I knocked once and stepped inside. She looked up, her face cycling through shock, relief, and wariness. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone before hanging up. "Nathan," she breathed. "You came." I closed the door behind me and remained standing. "You called your supervisor." Her face flushed. "I was desperate. You weren't answering your phone. So you brought your workplace into our private family matter?" "I panicked," she said, her voice small. "Robert has known you since you were a child. I thought maybe he could help." "Help with what?" "Exactly. Convincing me to give back the tickets after you insulted me? Or stopping me from supposedly ruining your reputation?" She looked down at her hands. "It wasn't like that. I was just nervous about how all this might look." "How it might look," I repeated flatly. "Not how it felt to me." "I didn't mean what I said," she blurted. "It was a stupid joke." I was nervous with everyone watching. I sat down across from her desk. "You've had 32 years of practice making me the butt of your jokes, Mom. Don't pretend this was some unusual slip." She didn't meet my eyes. "You're exaggerating. Remember when I landed my first major client? What did you say when I told you?" She shifted uncomfortably. "You said, well, even a broken clock is right twice a day." Everyone laughed. I'd worked 80-hour weeks for months to land that contract. "That's not fair. When I bought my first new car, you asked if I was sure I could afford the payments, despite knowing exactly how well my company was doing. When I moved into my house, you spent the entire housewarming party pointing out things that needed fixing." My voice remained calm, but inside I was shaking. Every memory I'd suppressed for years was suddenly crystal clear. "You've never been able to simply be happy for me," I continued. "Everything I do either gets dismissed or comes with a side of doubt. And I've spent my whole adult life trying to earn your approval anyway." Her eyes finally met mine, and I saw something I'd rarely seen before, genuine confusion. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "No, you're relieved that I'm no longer an embarrassment." "That's not the same thing." She flinched like I'd struck her. "That's not true, isn't it? You only started mentioning my career to your friends after I started making good money. Before that, I was your college dropout son who was still finding himself." "You were struggling," she protested. "I was worried about you. You were worried about what people would think." She stood suddenly, her chair rolling back against the wall. "That's enough, Nathan. I didn't raise you to speak to me this way." I stood too, feeling strangely calm. "You raised me to believe I was never quite good enough. That unless I followed your exact blueprint for success, I was somehow failing. And when I finally succeeded on my own terms, you couldn't even allow me that victory without undercutting it." "This is absurd," she said, but her voice wavered. "All this drama over one thoughtless comment." "It's not about the comment," I replied. "It's about 32 years of comments. It's about creating an environment where Aunt Sylvia felt completely comfortable whispering that insult in my ear because she knew you'd never call her on it." My mother's face changed then, her defenses crumbling slightly. "What did Sylvia say to you?" "That expensive gifts don't fix a wasted education." She paled. "She wouldn't. She did." And no one at that table thought it was strange when I walked out. Not even you, because that's how normal it is for everyone to talk to me that way. My mother sank back into her chair. For the first time since I could remember, she seemed at a loss for words. "I bought those tickets because despite everything, I remember how you used to dance around the kitchen to Bocelli's music." I said more gently, "How it was the one thing that always made you genuinely happy. I wanted to give you that moment, front row, in person, for his final tour." Tears welled in her eyes. "Nathan, but I'm done being the family punching bag," I continued. "I'm done funding a relationship where I'm not respected. I'm done being grateful for scraps of approval." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "The next move is yours, Mom, not your supervisor's, not Emma's, yours." As I walked out through the reception area, I noticed Robert Daniels watching from his office doorway. Our eyes met briefly before I pushed through the glass doors into the afternoon sunlight. I drove home in silence, no radio, no phone calls, just the hum of the engine and my own thoughts for company. I'd said things I'd been holding inside for decades, and whether it changed anything or not, I felt lighter. That evening, I turned off my phone and opened a bottle of whiskey I'd been saving for a special occasion. I poured 2 fingers into a crystal tumbler, a housewarming gift from a client who'd actually been happy with my work, and sat on my back deck watching the sunset. For the first time in memory, I wasn't calculating how to win my mother's approval. I wasn't rehearsing future conversations or planning what achievements might finally make her see me. I was just being. The whiskey burned pleasantly as I considered what came next. I could return to the old pattern, wait for her half-hearted apology, accept it, pretend the wound wasn't still raw, and continue the cycle. Or I could hold my ground and demand the respect I'd never required before. The thought terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. My neighbor's cat slunk along the fence line, pausing to watch me curiously before continuing on his evening patrol. A distant lawn mower hummed. Life continued, indifferent to my family drama. I refilled my glass and made a decision. I would give myself 1 week. 1 week without family calls, without guilt, without the weight of unmet expectations. 1 week to remember who I was outside of being Patricia Porter's disappointment of a son. 1 week to discover if the world actually ended when you stopped setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Day 3 of my self-imposed exile, and the world hadn't ended. The sun still rose. My clients still needed their projects completed, and my coffee machine still gurgled to life each morning at precisely 6:30. My phone lay dormant in a kitchen drawer. I'd checked it once after the first day, 28 missed calls, 17 voicemails, and 43 text messages. I didn't listen to the voicemails or read the texts. Instead, I'd shut it off completely and tucked it away. For the first time in years, I felt truly present. No constant checking for messages. No nagging anxiety about family obligations. No underlying current of not good enough running through my days. I worked more efficiently than I had in months. I went for runs without tracking my pace or distance. I cooked elaborate meals just for myself and ate them at my dining table instead of hunched over my laptop. On day 4, I drove to a nearby lake and rented a kayak. The water was mirror smooth, reflecting clouds and blue sky as I paddled lazily around the perimeter. A heron watched me from the shallows, unperturbed by my presence. "Nice day," called an elderly man fishing from a small rowboat. "Perfect," I replied, realizing I meant it. That evening, as I was grilling a steak on my back deck, my doorbell rang. My stomach tightened. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. It was Emma. She stood on my porch looking tired, a paper bag clutched in her hands. "Peace offering," she said, holding it up. "Mom's cinnamon rolls. I made them myself, though, so they're probably terrible." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let her in. "Your phone's been off," she said, following me to the kitchen. "Needed some quiet." She nodded, setting the bag on the counter. "You look good." Rested. "I feel good." I turned the steak on the grill, avoiding her eyes. "How's Mom?" Emma sighed, leaning against the counter. "Honestly, a mess. She took the rest of the week off work. She's not sleeping, barely eating. She keeps staring at old photo albums." I flipped the steak again, though it didn't need it. "She's not the villain you think she is, Nate." I looked at my sister then. "I don't think she's a villain. I think she's a complicated woman who's never learned how to show love without conditions." Emma's eyes widened slightly. "That's actually pretty insightful. Turns out I can think clearly when I'm not constantly seeking approval." She smiled sadly. "Fair enough." She watched me prepare a salad to go with my steak. "She told me what Aunt Sylvia said to you. And I had no idea. I feel awful that I didn't notice, that I just sat there while—" "It's fine," I interrupted. "You're not responsible for Sylvia's behavior. But I am responsible for mine," she insisted. "I should have said something. I should have noticed how they were treating you." I shrugged, uncomfortable with her sudden contrition. "You had your own role in the family. The perfect daughter, the safe bet. Is that how you see me?" She sounded hurt. "It's how Mom set us up," I corrected. "You were the success story. I was the cautionary tale. It wasn't your fault." Emma was quiet for a moment, watching me plate my dinner. "Are you really not going to give Mom those tickets back?" I sighed. "I don't know yet. She loves Bocelli. You know that." "I do know that. That's why I bought the tickets in the first place. So why punish her by—" "I'm not punishing her," I said, my voice sharper than intended. "I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference." Emma held up her hands in surrender. "Okay, I get it. I'm not here to pressure you, aren't you?" She had the grace to look embarrassed. "Maybe a little. But I'm also worried about you. You've never cut contact like this before." "I'm not cutting contact permanently," I said, carrying my plate to the dining table. "I'm taking space to figure out what kind of relationship I actually want with Mom going forward." Emma followed me, sitting across the table uninvited. "And what kind is that?" I cut into my steak, buying time. "One where I'm respected. Where my choices are valid even when they're different from what she would choose. Where success isn't measured by how closely I adhere to her life plan for me." "That's fair," Emma admitted. "And what about you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Are you happy being exactly what Mom wanted you to be?" Something flickered across her face. Discomfort, recognition, maybe both. "I like my life," she said carefully. "That's not what I asked." She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd had since her engagement. "It's complicated. Isn't it always?" "Mom pushed me too," she said quietly, just in directions I was already inclined to go. The pressure was still there, though. We sat in companionable silence as I ate my dinner. Emma declined my offer to fix her a plate, saying she needed to get back home to her husband. At the door, she hesitated. "Mom wants to see you," I figured. "Will you at least consider it? When you're ready?" I nodded. "When I'm ready." After she left, I returned to my half-eaten dinner, thinking about what she'd said. My mother was struggling, genuinely struggling, with the consequences of her behavior. Part of me felt vindicated, but another part felt a strange, unexpected sorrow. For the first time, I wondered if my mother was capable of change. Not just a temporary adjustment to get what she wanted, but real, meaningful change in how she saw me, how she saw herself. The next morning, I retrieved my phone from the drawer and turned it on. The notifications flooded in like a tidal wave, but I ignored them all except for one text from my mother. "I understand if you never want to speak to me again, but I hope you'll give me a chance to understand what I've done wrong. I love you, Nathan." It was the first time I could remember her acknowledging the possibility that she might be at fault. No deflection, no subtle blame shifting, just a simple request to understand. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I made coffee and took it outside to watch the sunrise, considering my options. After 30 minutes of quiet reflection, I sent a simple reply, "I'll come by on Saturday, 10 a.m. Her response came instantly, "I'll be here, thank you." The 2 days before Saturday stretched endlessly. I vacillated between rehearsing everything I wanted to say and deciding to say nothing at all, to simply listen for once. I cleaned my house obsessively, worked out until my muscles ached, and revised a major client proposal 3 times. When Saturday morning arrived, I drove to my childhood home with a strange sense of calm. The modest 2-story colonial looked smaller than I remembered, the blue paint fading in places, the garden beds meticulously maintained as always. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She'd lost weight in just a week, her clothes hanging slightly loose, dark circles shadowing her eyes. "You came," she said softly, stepping back to let me in. The house smelled the same, lemon polish and cinnamon, the scents of my childhood. Photos lined the entry hall, mostly of Emma's wedding and her college graduation. A few older ones of both of us as children. I noticed for the first time how few recent photos of me were displayed. "Would you like coffee?" she asked, leading me to the kitchen. "Sure." We sat at the kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of meals together. Sunlight streamed through the bay window, highlighting dust motes in the air. "I've been thinking a lot," my mother began, her fingers wrapped tightly around her mug. "About what you said at my office. About how I've treated you." I waited, determined not to make this easier for her. "At first I was angry," she continued. "I told myself you were overreacting, being too sensitive." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "But then I started really thinking about our relationship, about the things I've said to you over the years." She reached for her purse, hanging on the chair beside her, and pulled out a small notebook. "I actually wrote down some of them. Things the first remembered saying to you." Her voice trembled slightly. When I read them back to myself, I was horrified. She flipped the notebook open but didn't read from it. "When you dropped out of college, I told you that you were throwing your life away. When you started your business, I called it your little computer hobby. When you moved into your first apartment, I asked how long you thought you could afford it before having to come back home." I remained silent, watching emotions play across her face. When I saw them written down, I realized these weren't just casual comments. They were cruel. She closed the notebook, and I never spoke to Emma that way. Not once. "Why me?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Because you remind me so much of your father." I blinked, surprised. "Dad?" She nodded. "He was like you, creative, unconventional, always following his own path, and I loved him desperately for it." She wiped at her eyes. "But when he died, those same qualities terrified me. I saw him in you, and I panicked. I thought if I could make you more cautious, more traditional in your choices, you could protect me," I finished. "Yes." She looked down at her hands. "But that's not what I did, is it? Instead of protecting you, I tried to control you. And when I couldn't, I punished you for it." The silence between us felt different now. Not tense, but heavy with recognition. "When you gave me those tickets," she said softly, "I was overwhelmed. Not just by the gift itself, but by what it meant. That despite everything, you still knew me. You still cared enough to remember what mattered to me." Her voice broke. And in that moment, I was terrified. Of what? Of not deserving it. Of the fact that you've become this successful, generous person despite me, not because of me. She met my eyes again. So I did what I always do. I tried to put us back in our familiar roles. The disapproving mother, the disappointing son. It was safer somehow. For the first time, I saw my mother clearly, not as the critical force that had shaped my life, but as a frightened woman who had lost the love of her life and turned her grief into rigid control. "I'm not Dad," I said gently. "I can't be him, and I can't make up for losing him." "I know that," she whispered. "I've always known that. I just didn't know how to stop expecting it." My mother's confession hung in the air between us, a fragile bridge spanning decades of misunderstanding. I watched her hands trembling around her coffee mug and felt something shift inside me, not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of comprehension. "When did you start seeing me as Dad instead of me?" I asked. She considered this, gazing out the kitchen window at the old maple tree where my childhood swing still hung, its ropes weathered and frayed. "You were 16, she finally said. You came home with that ridiculous idea about starting a web design business instead of applying to colleges. Your eyes lit up exactly the way his used to when he talked about his music. My father had been a music teacher with dreams of composing film scores. He died before he could realize those dreams. I remember that day, I said. You told me I was being foolish, that I needed to focus on my grades. I was terrified, she admitted. Your father followed his passion and left me a widow at 42 with 2 children and a mortgage. All I could think was that you'd end up the same way, chasing dreams and leaving behind people who depended on you. Dad died of cancer, Mom. Not because of his career choices. She nodded, wiping away a tear. I know that logically, but grief isn't logical. I convinced myself that if I could make you choose a more stable path, you'd be safe. That I could protect you from his fate somehow. I leaned back in my chair, processing her words. So, every time I made a choice that reminded you of him, I panicked, she finished. And instead of supporting you, I tried to force you back onto what I thought was the safer road. We sat in silence, the wall clock ticking steadily, marking time in a house where time had seemed frozen since my father's death. What was he like? I asked suddenly. Not the version of him you've used to guilt me all these years, but the real dad. Something softened in my mother's face, a glimpse of the woman she must have been before grief hardened her edges. He was brilliant, frustrating, and kind, she said, with the ghost of a smile. He could spend our grocery money on a vintage guitar without consulting me, then write a song so beautiful. It made me forget to be angry. He saw possibilities where others saw obstacles. Like me, I said quietly, very much like you. She reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. He would have been so proud of what you've built. I should have been too. I studied her face, the lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a week ago, the gray at her temples. She'd stopped dying. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing her armor of perfection. I didn't come here to discuss Dad, I said gently. I came to talk about us, about how we move forward. She nodded, withdrawing her hand. I understand. And I want you to know that I'm listening, really listening, for perhaps the first time. I need you to understand something, I began carefully. When I started my business, when I made choices you didn't approve of, I wasn't rejecting you. I was finding myself. I see that now, she said. Too late, perhaps. Maybe not too late. But things can't go back to how they were. She nodded solemnly. What do you need from me? The directness of her question caught me off guard. My mother had never asked what I needed before. I need you to respect my choices, even when you don't understand them. I need you to stop comparing me to Emma or measuring my success against some arbitrary standard you've set. And I need you to acknowledge the hurt you've caused. I've hurt you deeply, she said without hesitation. I've been unfair, critical, and dismissive of your accomplishments. I've valued conformity over your happiness. And I'm truly sorry, Nathan. The apology I'd waited half my life to hear landed softly between us. I'd imagined this moment countless times, sometimes with rage, sometimes with vindication. I hadn't expected to feel sadness. Thank you, I said simply. Where do we go from here? She asked. I thought about the concert tickets tucked away in my desk drawer at home. I don't know exactly. This isn't going to be fixed in one conversation. No, she agreed. But it's a start. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, but my mother noticed. You should check that, she said. It might be important. I pulled out my phone to silence it and saw a text from my assistant, client emergency. Needs immediate response. Sorry to bother you on Saturday. Work one explained. I should probably head out. My mother nodded, standing as I did. Thank you for coming, for giving me a chance to start making things right. As we walked to the door, she paused by the hall table where a single framed photo sat. Me at age 10, grinning widely beside my father, both of us holding fishing rods. I kept this here all these years, she said, touching the frame lightly. Even when I couldn't look at you without seeing him, I kept this where I would see it every day. Something about the vulnerability in her voice, the quiet admission of her private grief, loosened a knot inside me that I hadn't realized was there. I have another copy of that photo in my office, I told her. It's the only picture of Dad I display. Her eyes met mine, surprised and suddenly hopeful. Really? He taught me to see possibilities, I said. I try to remember that every day. She hesitated, then asked, "Would you consider having dinner with me next week? Just the two of us. I'd like to hear about your business. Really hear about it this time. I'll think about it, I promised." When I reached my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. Through the living room window, I could see my mother still standing in the entryway, one hand resting on the photograph. She looked smaller somehow, more human. I drove home with mixed emotions. Not the clean resolution I might have hoped for, but something more complex and perhaps more genuine. My assistant's emergency turned out to be manageable with a few emails and a short call. By early afternoon, I was restless. I went for a long run, pushing myself harder than usual, as if I could outpace the morning's conversation. When I returned home, sweaty and breathless, I checked my phone to find a text from an unfamiliar number. "Nathan, this is Aunt Sylvia. Your mother gave me your number. I owe you an apology for what I said at the dinner. It was cruel and uncalled for. I've always been jealous of your freedom and success. I had no right to diminish your accomplishments." I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Aunt Sylvia had never apologized to anyone for anything in all the years I'd known her. Before I could decide what to write back, another text arrived from Emma. "Mom told me about your conversation. I'm really proud of you, bro, and I think she's actually trying to change. She called Sylvia and tore into her about what she said to you. I've never heard Mom stand up to her like that." This revelation stunned me. My mother confronting her sister, something she'd never done before, felt like evidence of genuine change. Not just words, but action. I showered and changed, then found myself staring at my desk drawer where the Bocelli tickets lay. I pulled them out, examining the gold-embossed lettering, the promised date now just 3 weeks away. My phone rang, my mother's number. "Hello? Nathan, I'm sorry to bother you," she began, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "But there's something I need to tell you. What is it?" "I spoke with Sylvia today about what she said to you at the dinner." She paused. "It didn't go well. Emma mentioned you called her." "Yes, well, she's not speaking to me now. Says I've changed, and that I'm choosing you over family." She gave a short, humorless laugh. Apparently setting boundaries is only acceptable when she does it. "I'm sorry," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "Don't be. It's long overdue." She hesitated. "There's something else. Robert, my supervisor, he's been asking questions about whether you and I resolved our situation. Apparently, he's concerned about my focus at work." I tensed. "What did you tell him?" "That my relationship with my son is none of his business," she replied firmly. "And that if he mentions it again, I'll file a complaint with HR." I nearly dropped the phone. The Patricia Porter I knew never pushed back against authority, never risked professional discomfort. "You said that to Robert?" "I did," she confirmed, a note of surprise in her own voice. "And do you know what? It felt good, really good." I smiled despite myself. "I bet it did. Anyway, I won't keep you. I just wanted you to know." After we hung up, I sat looking at the tickets again. Her birthday celebration had been ruined, but the concert was still weeks away. I thought about her face as she opened the envelope, that brief moment of genuine joy before everything shattered. I thought about her standing up to Sylvia, to her boss. Small steps, perhaps, but significant ones for a woman who'd spent decades avoiding conflict and maintaining appearances at all costs. The next morning, I woke early and drove to a coffee shop across town, where I often worked when I needed a change of scenery. As I settled in with my laptop, the barista brought over my usual order. "Someone paid for this already," she said, setting down the coffee. I looked up, confused. "Who?" She pointed to an elderly man sitting by the window. "That gentleman over there. Said you helped his grandson get an internship last month." I recognized him then, Mr. Abernathy, whose grandson Tyler had impressed me during a brief interview. I'd offered the kid a chance, despite his lack of formal education. "Mind if I join you?" Mr. Abernathy asked, approaching my table. "Please." I gestured to the empty chair. "Tyler can't stop talking about your company," he said, settling his thin frame into the seat. "Says you're teaching him more in a month than he learned in 2 years of community college." "He's a quick learner," I replied. "Has a natural talent for design." The old man nodded, his eyes crinkling. "His parents wanted him to be an accountant. Practical, they said. He shook his head. But the boy sees the world differently. Always has. Sometimes the unconventional path is the right one, I said. Took me 73 years to figure that out, Mr. Abernathy admitted. Spent 40 years at a job I hated because it was expected of me. He tapped the table with a gnarled finger. Don't make my mistake, son. Life's too short for other people's expectations. As he shuffled back to his table, his words echoed in my mind. Life's too short for other people's expectations, including, perhaps, my expectation that my mother would never change. That evening, I found myself standing outside my mother's house again, this time unannounced. She opened the door in reading glasses and an old cardigan, clearly not expecting company. Nathan, she said, surprised. Is everything all right? I held out the gold envelope containing the Bocelli tickets. These are still yours, I said, if you want them. Her eyes widened, but she didn't reach for the envelope. Why? Because you're trying, I said simply. And because life's too short. She took the envelope with trembling hands. I don't deserve this. Maybe not, I agreed. But I'm not offering it because you deserve it. I'm offering it because I choose to. No strings, no expectations. Will you? She hesitated. Will you still come with me? I hadn't expected the question. Do you want me to? More than anything, she whispered. But only if you want to. I thought about it for a moment. Let's see how dinner goes next week. We can decide then. She nodded, clutching the envelope to her chest. Thank you, Nathan. As I drove home under a sky dusted with stars, I realized something important. I hadn't given my mother the tickets to win her approval, or to restore our relationship to what it had been. I'd done it because I was finally free of the need for her validation. I could give without expecting anything in return, not because I was resigned to disappointment, but because I now understood my worth didn't depend on her recognition of it. For the first time in my life, I felt truly adult in relation to my mother, not rebellious, not compliant, but self-governing. Whatever came next, I would face it with this newfound clarity. The night of the Bocelli concert arrived, mild for April, stars puncturing the dark canvas above the city. I adjusted my tie in the rearview mirror before stepping out to meet my mother on the sidewalk outside her apartment building. She'd moved there 3 months after our confrontation, downsizing from the family home in what she called a fresh start. You look handsome, she said, smoothing her silk dress, a deep burgundy that complemented her silver hair. She'd stopped dyeing it, another small act of liberation. You look nice too, I replied, offering my arm. Ready? In the weeks following our conversation, we'd established a fragile routine dinner every other Tuesday, occasional texts about mundane things. Small talk at first, carefully avoiding landmines. Then gradually, painfully, we began excavating decades of misunderstandings, one conversation at a time. I applied for that creative writing course she mentioned as we walked toward the concert hall, streetlights catching the silver threads in her dress. The one I told you about last week. The one at the community college? That's great. She nodded, a hint of nervousness in her smile. It's silly at my age, but it's not silly, I interrupted gently. Dad would have loved that you're doing this. His name no longer hung between us like a ghost. We'd begun reclaiming him, piece by piece, sharing memories without judgment, acknowledging both his brilliance and his flaws. The concert hall loomed ahead, its facade lit dramatically. Crowds streamed toward the entrance, excitement vibrating in the evening air. My mother's grip tightened on my arm. I never properly thanked you, she said suddenly. Not just for the tickets, but for forcing me to see myself clearly. She paused, searching for words. I've spent 60 years being terrified of vulnerability, of being seen as anything less than perfect. I guided her through the crowd toward the entrance. I know. Your father saw through it immediately. Patty, he used to say, the world won't end if you admit you're human. She laughed softly. It took me losing him, nearly losing you, and 60 years of exhaustion to realize he was right. An usher checked our tickets, eyebrows rising slightly at the premium seating. Front row center, he said, gesturing toward the auditorium. Excellent choice, sir. The theater hummed with anticipation, the stage set with a grand piano and minimal orchestral arrangement. As we took our seats, my mother gasped softly. We're so close, she whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Nathan, this is worth every penny, I finished. surprising myself with how true it felt. Emma had called me the night before, curious about our plans. "Are you sure about this?" she'd asked. After everything, I'd considered my answer carefully. "I'm not doing this for her," I'd told my sister. "I'm doing it for both of us." The house lights dimmed, and the audience fell silent. As the orchestra filed onto the stage, I glanced at my mother's profile, the same face. I'd spent a lifetime trying to please, now transformed by something I rarely associated with her, joy. Bocelli's entrance brought the crowd to its feet. My mother stood with them, tears already streaming down her face as the first notes filled the hall. I found myself watching her more than the performance, this woman who'd shaped my life through both love and damage, experiencing pure, uncomplicated happiness. During time to say goodbye, she reached for my hand without looking, her fingers trembling slightly. I took it, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. The concert passed in a blur of standing ovations and encore performances. When the final notes faded, my mother turned to me, makeup streaked by tears, looking younger than she had in years. "Thank you," she said simply. The meet and greet afterward was intimate, just 20 people in a small reception area. When Bocelli greeted my mother, she managed to thank him in halting Italian she'd practiced for weeks. He kissed her hand, and I captured the moment on my phone, her face luminous with fulfilled longing. Outside, the night had cooled. We walked in comfortable silence toward the parking garage. "I have something for you," she said suddenly, stopping beneath a streetlight. She reached into her small evening bag and pulled out an envelope not unlike the one I'd given her months before. "What's this?" "Open it when you get home," she said. "Not now." I nodded, tucking it into my jacket pocket. Later that night, after dropping her off with a genuine hug at her door, I sat on my deck with a nightcap and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten on stationery I recognized from my childhood. "My dearest Nathan, tonight you gave me a gift beyond measure, not just Andrea's voice, but your presence despite our painful history. I don't deserve this second chance, but I promise not to waste it. There's something I should have given you long ago. When your father died, he left letters for both you and Emma to open when you turned 18. I gave Emma hers, but I kept yours hidden. I told myself I was protecting you from his encouragement to follow your dreams, dreams that terrified me after losing him. It was unforgivable. The letter is enclosed, unopened. Whatever relationship we build from here will be based on truth, however difficult. With love and profound regret, Mom." A smaller weathered envelope fell from within hers. The handwriting on it, my name, written in my father's bold script, made my throat tighten. The seal was intact, the paper yellowed with 18 years of waiting. I opened it carefully, heart pounding. "Nate, if you're reading this, I've missed watching you become a man. And for that, I'm profoundly sorry. There's so much I wanted to teach you, but perhaps the most important thing is this. Trust yourself. You've always marched to your own rhythm. Since you were small, you've seen possibilities where others saw limitations. This world needs dreamers who can build, innovators who can create. Don't let anyone, not even your mother, convince you that safety is more valuable than purpose. Your mother loves with fierce protection. If I'm gone, that instinct will only intensify. Remember that her fear comes from love, even when it feels like control. Be patient with her, but never surrender your essence. I've set aside some money for you, not much, but enough to start whatever journey calls to you at 18. Your mother has the details, though she may resist sharing them. Stand firm. The funds are yours, no conditions attached. Whatever path you choose, know that I would have supported you without reservation. My greatest wish is for you to find work that feels like joy. All my love, Dad." I read the letter 3 times, each word healing something broken long ago. Then I noticed a postscript I'd missed. P.S. The box in the attic, labeled Tax Records 1998, contains my composition notebooks. The music was never published, but perhaps someday you'll do something with it. It was always meant for you. Dawn found me still on the deck, watching the sky lighten over the city. My father's words had reframed not just my relationship with my mother, but my understanding of our entire family history. The validation I'd sought for decades had been waiting in that envelope, hidden by fear disguised as love. I called my mother early, knowing she'd be awake. "Did you read it?" She answered without preamble, "Yes." My voice was steady, We need to talk about the money he mentioned. Silence stretched between us. I used it for your college tuition, she finally admitted. I convinced myself it's what he would have wanted once he understood the dangers of entrepreneurship. Another choice I made from fear. I should have felt angry, but instead, I felt something unexpected, compassion. You can't repay it, I said. Not a question, but an acknowledgement. No, she whispered. But I've listed you as beneficiary on my retirement accounts. It doesn't make it right, but... Mom, I interrupted gently. I don't need the money. That's not why I called. Then why? He mentioned composition notebooks in the attic. Do you still have them? She was quiet for so long. I thought the connection had dropped. Yes, she finally said. I could never bring myself to look at them, but I couldn't throw them away either. I'd like to see them. 2 days later, I sat in my home office, surrounded by 5 weathered notebooks, their pages filled with my father's musical notations, melodies he'd created but never shared with the world, compositions ranging from simple piano pieces to complex orchestral arrangements. On the final page of the last notebook, he'd written a dedication. For Nathan, may you find the courage to share your music with the world, whatever form it takes. The following week, I invited my mother to dinner at my house for the first time since our reconciliation began. She arrived bearing a homemade pie and obvious nervousness. I have something to show you, I said after dinner, leading her to my home studio. On the screen was a simple website, Porter Legacy Project. What is this? She asked, scanning the page. I've hired musicians to record Dad's compositions. Once they're complete, I'll release them online with all proceeds going to a scholarship fund for artists pursuing unconventional paths. She stared at the screen, one hand covering her mouth. He would have loved that. There's more, I continued, clicking to another page. I'm establishing a small business grant program in his name for creative entrepreneurs without formal education. 5 grants yearly, with mentorship included. Nathan, she whispered, this is beautiful. I turned to face her directly. I want you on the selection committee. You understand both sides. Now the fear and the freedom. That perspective is valuable. She looked startled, then thoughtful. I'd be honored. As we stood there, I realized something fundamental had shifted between us. The wounds weren't gone. Some would always remain tender to the touch, but they no longer defined us. We had begun building something new from the wreckage of what was lost. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma, meeting tomorrow about Patrick's intervention. Need you there. He's getting worse. Another family crisis looming. But for the first time, I didn't feel dread at the prospect of navigating family dynamics. Something had fundamentally changed, not just between my mother and me, but within myself. My father's letter had given me more than validation. It had granted permission to release the weight of impossible expectations, both those placed upon me and those I'd placed on others. The truth was both simpler and more complex than I'd imagined. We were all just human, doing our imperfect best with the wounds we carried. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle at first, then quickening against the windows. My mother moved to stand beside me, watching the drops trace patterns on the glass. I was so afraid of losing you the way I lost him, she said quietly. I never realized that fear was driving you away faster than anything else could. We're still here, I replied. That's what matters now. The rain continued falling, washing away winter's remnants, preparing the world for new growth. Not unlike forgiveness, I thought not a single act but a process, clearing ground for whatever might grow next. I'm proud of you, my mother said suddenly. Not because of what you've achieved or earned, but because of who you are. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. The words I'd waited a lifetime to hear landed softly between us. Not a resolution, we were far beyond such simple endpoints, but a waypoint on a journey neither of us could have anticipated. Thank you, I said simply, knowing now it was enough. Story 2. Our son is not you. Our sponsor is you. Shortly after I spent $18,000 paying their bills, Mom choked on Easter. The golden child, my sister, then gave me a mug containing their mutual guidance. Give up wondering why. Simply pay and be happy. I accomplished this after following their advice. They were phoning in a panic the next morning because of this. Hurry up. It's amusing. My mother's face was softly shadowed by the Easter centerpiece, as she held out her wine glass and giggled. With the cup in my hands, I sat there in silence. Ashley gave me the one with the curdling cream smile just now. Give up wondering why. Simply pay and be happy. Everyone chuckled. Dad laughed too, from his side of the table. Ashley made a fictitious toast with her glass, she said to our sponsor. Mom then jumped in, as if that were the punchline she had been waiting all night to say. Our son is not you. Our sponsor is you. More than the laughing, the words lingered in the air. One recently sent $18,000 to pay off their past due mortgage. Ashley's small fender collision, which somehow required a complete bumper replacement, and Mom's second root canal. After cutting short my work trip to attend to their emergency, I hadn't even finished unpacking. And now this. Ashley. With the cup in my palms, I spoke. Even so, where did you find this? Yes, I had it built to order. It seemed appropriate, so she smiled. You always worry about why you are the one assisting everyone. We simply believed that I glanced at my mother first, then my father. Mom grinned. Be less sensitive. You've always been the one with the generosity. Dad never even raised his head from his phone. It's only a joke. You mean to relax? It's a joke. They joked last Christmas that since you essentially manage the household, I can deduct family costs from my taxes. Or how they made a joke about their sponsor being upgraded. When I received a promotion at work, Ashley was wearing an expensive pink dress. As I glanced around the table, she said she couldn't afford something suitable for Easter, so I paid for it. Dylan, her fiancé, stuffed his face as if it were a free buffet. For him, it was my mother grinning like if she hadn't just used tears and remorse to get me to settle her credit card bill. And Dad wasn't there, unless someone wanted anything financed, signed, or mended, as usual. This is wonderful, isn't it? Mom added. A true vacation with the family. It wasn't pleasant. It wasn't genuine at all. I was the show's sponsor, and it was a performance. I gave them the grin they requested. And something silently and permanently broke inside of me at that very instant. This was not always the case, or perhaps it was. And I just didn't notice the rot beginning because I was too busy trying to be helpful. I was raised to believe that love was based on favors, because being the one who could be relied upon meant being the one who was loved. Believed they would eventually view me in that way if I put forth enough effort, gave enough, and was strong enough, regarded Ashley. However, I was mistaken. In actuality, they had owned Ashley from the beginning. Their pride, their miracle, their evidence that they were correct. And I was a walking safety net, a resource, a backup, and a vital instrument. It began slowly. It always does. When Mom's dental work became necessary, I covered Ashley's rent for 3 months after her first startup failed. I went over it twice. When an old friend of Dad's was unable to repay a debt. You know who kept the lights on at home? Me. Always me. Additionally, they gave me the impression that I was repaying them each time I took the initiative. We sacrificed a lot to raise you, you know? When I was hesitant to send money, Mom would remark, we didn't want you to succeed so you could keep everything. Once, when I asked about repaying Ashley's auto insurance, Dad added, Ashley had her own version too. We're not exactly strangers. We are related. If things were reversed, I would aid you, but I made sure they weren't, so they were never. Because I murdered myself so that I would always be the one out of trouble. Never owe money. Never in need. 6 months ago, the first serious crack appeared. Ashley sobbed when she phoned me regarding Dylan's business. It's crumbling, she cried. He will lose everything if we do not cover the next round of equipment. Please. I wouldn't ask until we were in dire need, you know. That following evening, I transferred $4,700. A week later, I noticed her in a picture at a posh vineyard, laughing, sipping a glass of wine, with Dylan by her side, flashing a Rolex. Well-deserved, however, the caption was lackluster. I remained silent. Maybe it was sponsored, I told myself instead. It may have been old. Perhaps she needed the respite. However, the pictures continued to appear. New iPhones, brunches, and designer shoes. The Easter supper with the cup came next. The sponsored joke, the derision. I began looking through my money. I went back 5 years, $72,850 after that night. I had given them that much. Not a loan, gift, bailout, transfer, payment, or emergency cover. When I saw the sum, my hands trembled. I changed all of my internet passwords, phoned my bank, froze 3 shared cards, created a new savings account, and transferred the remaining funds there. Mom texted me that evening. "Mom, can you send $600, honey? The HOA is threatening to charge me a fee since I neglected to pay them." Only until Monday. I didn't respond. After 10 minutes, "Ashley, Mom claims you're angry. Is the cup at issue here? Don't be odd, please. It's only a joke. Nothing has changed." Then at midnight, "We didn't mean it at all, Mom. We appreciate you, you know. Don't let this become a thing." I gazed at the display. Thank you. Like how much they valued me. The night I drove 6 hours in the snow to get Dad from the ER due to Ashley's appointment at the spa. Such as when I was excluded from the Maui family vacation. You wouldn't want to spend money on such a thing, would you? No, this was not gratitude. It was addiction. The version of me that paid discreetly and made no requests was the one they were addicted to. Withdrawal is cruel, all right. The next morning, Ashley showed up at my apartment. I opened the door and she barged in like she owned the place. "Seriously?" she snapped. "You're ignoring us now?" I leaned against the counter. "You mean like how you ignored my last race? My last birthday?" And every time I said I was overwhelmed, she scoffed. "You're creating a scene over a joking mug." "No," I responded. "I'm creating a scene about $72,000 in zero regard." "That. Shut her up." She blinked. "What are you talking about? I've monitored every dime I've sent in the previous 5 years," I said. "Every emergency, every loan you never paid back, every phone call that concluded with me feeling like I owed you something." Defensive, Ashley crossed her arms. "We are related. You are expected to assist." "No," I said. "I was helpful. You called me stiff, yet I kept you comfy." Mom accused me of being paranoid as I assisted her in paying off her credit cards. While Dad told everyone I was chilly, I assisted him with his projects. She gave an eye roll. "This is really dramatic. What? Now you're interrupting us? Will you punish us?" I grinned. "No," I answered softly. I ceased to inquire why. And when I said no, I grinned for once. I couldn't get that smile off my face the remainder of the evening. Word must have spread quickly because I received an invitation the next evening. Zoom call with family. Subject line: Ashley Sinnott, let's get things straight. She did, of course. Not being at the heart of resolution was something she could never tolerate. At 7 p.m., I joined the call sharp. Ashley exuded strategic appeal with her immaculate appearance. Mom was all about practice and pearls. Dad mute, not involved, as usual. Dylan appeared to be concerned that remorse was contagious as he hovered in the background, his shoulders partially out of view. "He's right there!" Ashley gave a little chirp. "I'm glad you made it." We decided it was time to go. Correct, naturally. Mom gave a nod. "Easter is coming up. Give yourself time to recover. First, family." I grinned. Simple, managed. I'm glad that everyone is in agreement. Ashley started off with a self-congratulatory speech about how sticking together makes us stronger and that friction isn't healthy. Allison, as if background checks were being conducted beneath the table. My phone was unlocked. I launched the banking app. Ashley had stopped speaking. It has to do with restoring confidence. Ashley's 2021 Toyota Corolla, which was registered in my name, had a $249 monthly auto payment when I accessed the insurance dashboard. I switched tabs after clicking Cancel Policy Confirmed. DMV website. Ashley receives ownership from me. I sent that to the bank. A last flourish sent Ashley $1. Communication. You won't receive another cash from me after this. Put it in a frame. Click Ops completed. She lost her phone. She blinked, frowned as he looked down. Yes. What is this? I took a drink of my tea. I recently finished a significant task. Mom narrowed her eyes. What sort of significance? I grinned and leaned in. Do not be concerned. It will be noticeable by tomorrow. After unmuting myself, I clicked Leave Meeting and saw their bewildered, frozen expressions disappear like smoke. My phone's chime verified everything. Title transferred, insurance canceled, payment sent. Additionally, Ashley received a legal notification in her mailbox informing her that she was now the proud owner of her own mess. At precisely 9:17 in the morning, Ashley's vehicle vanished from her driveway. She texted me as soon as she noticed it, so I know that. Did you cancel my insurance, Ashley? Ashley? Really? My automobile is gone, Ashley. Towed. Ashley, you're insane. Give me a call immediately. I didn't respond. After an hour, my mother began phoning. Dylan, then my father. Within less than an hour, 8 calls were missed. I was aware of what would happen next. Text me, Dad. We must speak. 5 p.m. on Sunday. Only family. No justifications. Excellent. I arrived without a smile, without remorse, and without an apology. Every one of them was present. I knew they would be my mother, crossing their arms like a disgruntled educator. My father's hands were tense in his lap. Ashley's hair is a disaster. There are no car keys visible. Use your phone as a weapon. Dylan left the group, pale and quiet. Dad groaned as I started to sit. I remained upright. Do you find this amusing? Mom lost her temper. Your actions toward your sister. The shame. The risk. Risk? I arched an eyebrow. You mean holding her accountable for her own stuff at last? That level of risk? Ashley spoke in a shrill, terrified voice. My car was towed by you? No, I said. Your vehicle was towed. I just ceased making payments on it. I extracted a folder from within my bag. Dense.well, prepared.color, coded $72.85 so. Laying it flat on the coffee table, I said. Over the past 5 years, I've given this family that much. Everyone fell quiet. I've stopped asking. I'm requesting money. With a harsh, trembling chuckle, Mom laughed. You're not serious. Oh, I said, I am. I'm being completely serious for the first time in my life. I opened the folder to find neatly marked bank statements, transfer details, sales, screenshots, and auto payment schedules. I've divided the sum among the 3 of you. Mom, $23,700, I said. $38,600 for Ashley. $10,550, Dad. I anticipate a payment plan. You have 90 days. Dad sprang to his feet, his voice low and angry. Do you believe you can treat your family as though they were debtors? No, I said. I believe you have a guilt complex and have been treating me like an ATM. All I'm doing is the arithmetic. Ashley gave an eye roll. You're keeping score now, so what? You claim to respect me and to be doing all of this out of love. You then handed me a cup with the words, stop asking why. Simply pay and be happy. I grabbed another document and slid it in their direction. Do you recall the emergency credit line I established for the family 3 years prior? Mom called. Only a formality. I gestured at the signature. It has legal force behind it. I can file a lawsuit then. The space was still. Dylan said something to himself. What? Ashley lost her temper. He glanced back at her after glancing at me. His voice wavered. This is what I predicted would occur. He would fight back, I warned you. You informed him. She let out a cry. Do you mean me? He said I trusted you. You said that he was too meek and would never fight back. Ashley's mouth quivered. Once more, Mom got in. You're going overboard. Are you going to ruin this family? No, I said. I'm simply shutting off my accounts. I then took out the $1 transfer printout. I let it fall on the table. Note of transaction. You won't receive another cash from me after this. Put it in a frame. Also, if you believe this to be treachery, I remarked, moving in the direction of the door, then you haven't even started to comprehend the true meaning of losing me. As I walked away, nobody spoke. For the very first time, they were unable to. The quiet was deafening. No one reached out when I left that living room with my folder and their jaws on the floor. No angry texts. No calls of guilt. Ashley didn't post a single passive-aggressive meme. It was joy. My phone was silent for the first time in years. Silent, as I had created it that way. Not because I was being iced out by them. I wasn't frozen. I had freedom. As much as I would like to say otherwise, I moved on right away. A moment passed. 3 days following the confrontation, uncertainty began to creep in. Standing in front of the oat milk section of the grocery store, I was debating whether to switch brands in order to save money. What if I was too harsh? I asked myself. What if I had been able to manage it better? Then my phone broke like clockwork. Ashley was the one. Ashley, for your information, Mom's heart rate increased. She claims that the stress you produced is the reason. It like a snake raising its head there. The previous pattern resurfaced. To blame, shame, emotional extortion. I didn't flinch this time, though. 2 words were typed back by me. I really meant it when I blocked. The consequences were immediate. Mom unexpectedly arrived at my apartment building 2 days later. Only because I was buzzed by the front desk did I know. It's an emergency, she says, and she's your mother. I didn't even inquire about the nature of the situation. Simply inform her that the sponsor's no longer in operation. Click. Their desperation wasn't the strangest thing, though. It was the pleasure it brought. I was returning to the gym, preparing stress-free meals, and getting better sleep. I'm browsing my financial app. It felt as though spirits had been carried by my abode. It was only after I ejected them that I realized. Then one evening, I received an unexpected message. Ashley didn't say that. Not from my folks, from Dylan. Dylan, can we have a conversation? I realized this is strange. I spent some time looking at the screen. If that was bait, I didn't know. Curiosity did me no favors, but I wasn't sure whether he was being used as a puppet. Not guilty. Simply speak, Dylan. I understand. I do. I have a message for you. By themselves. The next day, we decided to meet in a coffee shop. Land that is neutral. He appeared as though he hadn't gotten any sleep in a week. I am not here to stand up for Ashley. He took a seat. I answered, good, as I have no interest in listening to it. He gave a nod. I believe I'm done, which is why I'm here. I took notice of that. I saw her tell lies in front of you. I was expecting for your parents to act decently after witnessing them allow it to happen. However, they didn't. Now he combed his hair with his hand. She is now discussing bringing an emotional distress lawsuit against you. I blinked. Really? He gave a nod. She's going downhill. Furthermore, I doubt she thinks it will succeed. All she wants to do is punish you, I reclined. What are your current position? He gave me a direct glance. I'm leaving. I'm finished. Dilution of financing. A lawyer has already been consulted. I'm requesting a separation. I was more shocked by that than by any blow she could have delivered. I apologize for not speaking up sooner, he continued. I ought to have. The only thing keeping everything together was you. All I wanted was to keep afloat. For a time, we sat in quiet. He then gave me an envelope enclosed in a check just before I departed. $1,000. Remind yourself of what they owe you. It's for me, not them, he replied, acknowledging that it's not much. I reasoned that you should be aware that someone noticed you. I felt the sting of actual tears behind my eyes for the first time in years. Not from suffering, but from approval. I opened my laptop that evening and retrieved the spreadsheet with Dylan's name next to the family debt category. I wrote and sincerely paid $1,000. I then changed the file's name. Closure is underway. I poured a glass of wine for myself, the positive sort. The type 1 saved for vacations that were invariably marred by forced grins and more constrained spending plans. I drank to myself this time, to the tranquility, to the limits, to the liberty of having no sponsors. 3 months and 90 days have passed since I left that house, because I left my quiet behind and put the folder on their coffee table. Since the call ended around week 4, I haven't seen them. By week 6, the text had decreased. Ashley has been taking time to recuperate, which I presume is code for finding a new idiot to support her lifestyle, according to what I've heard from common acquaintances. I didn't give a damn. I had lost my anger. The thing they never understood was that I said, I'm done. I didn't mean to be angry. I intended to say finished, as in a chapter closed, like an internal door bolted. I was no longer a sponsor, and I was now a man with a future free of shame, pleading, and emotionally ruined individuals. Bearing my last name, I moved out of state for a new job. Better pay, less stress, a new apartment, and a place free of the echoes of past phone conversations and frantic pleas for money. I joined a boxing gym because I could now fight, not because I wanted to. Once more, I had my own schedule, my funds, mine, my vitality, mine. I didn't make pals who were looking for something. The sort that didn't give you bills masquerading as emotional need, and who remembers your birthday. I even went back to dating. Someone who is tranquil, someone kind. What do you need today? Someone asked. Can you help instead? Only this once. It wasn't simply better. It was authentic. The first time in 10 years. Then, Precisely 90 days after the altercation, something unexpected occurred last Sunday. I received a notice. Mom gave a $1 deposit. The memo. I assumed you would want the mug to be appropriately framed. For a whole minute, I gazed at it. I initially believed it to be a prank, bait, or a passive-aggressive attempt to entice me back. However, a second notification from Dad's interest came in. People say I owe you more. And then $2.50 from Ashley half an hour later. Not a message, nothing but quiet. It seemed unbelievable to me. It was absurd, symbolic, petty. Perhaps they were making fun of me. Nevertheless, I burst out laughing. After weeks, for the first time, I almost spilled my coffee laughing so hard. Because all of a sudden, I understood that they were finally fulfilling a request I had made for years. They were repaying me in the tiniest, most grudging and pettiest manner imaginable. Perhaps what frightened them most, though, was that it had begun, not the cash, not the quiet. However, I eventually forced them to face the consequences. The twist, however, wasn't that. Later that evening, the twist was revealed. My phone buzzed once again while I was enjoying a beer and taking in the city lights from my balcony. It wasn't a text. My bank sent me a notice. $3,000 had been paid. Forward the Ashley memo to her. Not at all. I blinked, revitalized. Checked once more. It was authentic $3,000. Not a message. No justification. I realized, however, that this was not a sacrifice for peace. It was terror. Fear that I might actually file a lawsuit. I wasn't playing a bluff. That she had lost her power. She had misjudged me. They all had. And now? They were now attempting to re-enter the version of me that paid the bill and remained silent. Just once. Too late, too little. I captured a screen grab. I put it in the area where I keep track of their debt. I then gave that folder a new name. Closure verified. I gave $1,000 self the money to a nearby women's shelter the following morning. I transferred the remaining funds to a new savings account name, rebuilt with money. Because this narrative was just that. Not retaliation, not discipline, recovery. I regained my identity, my money, my time, and most importantly, my tranquility. I looked about and muttered as I stood in my new flat, which was bright and full of plants and free of any sense of coerced responsibility. Families ought to feel like this.